Welcome to Green Drinks, everyone who's joining us. My name is Ginevra. I'm the program director here at Sustainable Woodstock. We were founded in 2009, and we're a nonprofit community and environmental action and education organization building on Woodstock's legacy as the birthplace of the modern conservation movement. I'm getting feedback again. I don't know who it's from. Maybe everyone mute themselves right now, and then unmute yourself when you're ready to talk, Don and Annie. Yeah, just in case. I don't know where it's coming from. So you've come to one of our Green Drinks events. These are social events to connect people who have similar interests. We invite local nonprofits, businesses, and individuals to make short presentations that highlight local sustainability initiatives, or sometimes more global ones, as is the case here. We are doing Green Drinks virtually right now, but we'll have some in-person events coming up this summer, so do look out for that. Our next Green Drinks, though, is going to be April 13th and will be titled, What is a Land Trust and What Can It Offer Me? So this is my brief plug for that event. We'll be joined by Peg Marins, the Vice President of Conservation at the Upper Valley Land Trust, for a wide-ranging discussion about land conservation. So that will be April 13th. And April is the month of Earth Day. So we've also got an Earth Day event coming up on the 22nd with Leah Pennyman, who's an author and activist. She'll be presenting Black Earth Wisdom. So April is going to be a very exciting month, and I would love for you to join us. You can look at our website for those events. So for tonight, before we get started, I'm just going to run through the agenda and introduce Don and Annie. Right now, you're being recorded. I'm going to double check it. Yes, you're being recorded. So I'll record this meeting, and I'll email it out to anyone who's registered to attend, and you're currently muted. So if you have questions, please do type those into the chat box on the side of the screen here. If you're unfamiliar with Zoom, you can just run your cursor over the window and a chat option should pop up. If it doesn't, hit the ... more option. And if all else fails, you can always virtually raise your hand by hitting the reactions button, and I can unmute you. So we'll save those questions until after Don and Annie have gone ahead and presented, and then myself and our executive director, Michael Caduto, can pose those to Don and Annie. Otherwise, I'm going to follow up with the video, contact info, and anything else that you two want me to share with everyone. I think that did it. I think it did. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. This workshop is led by Don Jones and Annie Smith-Jones, who are joining us tonight. Don and Annie live in Bridgewater on a former farm that they are working on bringing back to productive use. They moved here in 2020, and the Coelho family moved in with them in 2021, consisting of their daughter Lizzie, husband Chef Bernardo, and 4 grandkids aged 2 to 9. Following positions with startup and large environmental consulting firms, Don and Annie decided to start their own small consulting business. That was 31 years ago, with most of their work in the Mid-Atlantic area and South Carolina. They always wanted to give back and were fortunate to become involved with a nonprofit focusing on identifying, assessing, and cleaning up some of the world's most contaminated sites. They have been involved with lead poisoning projects in Mexico, Senegal, and Brazil, where contamination has resulted in deaths and developmental problems, particularly with children. This presentation will discuss some of their work in Senegal and Mexico, and they're glad to have this forum to spread awareness of the severity of polluted health impacts and provide some positive results as well. So thank you both so much for joining us, and I'll let you go ahead.
All right, I'm ready to start. Does everything look all right?
We hear you well, and you'll want to go ahead and share your screen so we can see your slideshow. Oh, you can.
Thank you for helping me along.
Here you go, Annie.
Thank you.
So we'll just comment through, and this work, it's really on lead, and you'll learn more than you probably wanted to know. And hopefully I can get it to work.
Yes, that looks good.
So First off, I have to hide you guys because I can't see it. There we go. So this Pure Earth, it used to be called the Blacksmith Institute, but they're in New York, and it was found as a way to address some of the world's worst pollution problems. People were involved with water, rainforests, other things, and the guy who started this says, "Yeah, let's get into hazardous waste and problems like that." It's really a cooperative approach. We don't go into any place and tell folks what they need to do, how to clean stuff up, that we know what's good for them. They have to want to do it. And we'll get into that in a little bit. They have a technical advisory board of probably 30 or 40 people that expertise in different areas to advise. There are people in country all over the world. And they now focus, they started out as a more anything, what can we get done? And now it's really just on lead and mercury. And because those are the two most prevalent pollution problems that are affecting literally 100 million people, especially children. Lead contamination, we'll talk about. The mercury I have not really been involved in, but gold mining, artisanal gold mining, they use mercury in an open walk, basically to extract gold from the tailings or ore. And obviously that goes into the air and it's a waste product if what they can't save. And there's currently more mercury in the atmosphere and the oceans and our fish that is coming from artisanal gold mining than any other source in the world. Pure Earth also has probably the largest database by country and sites of the health of the planet. So there's risks that we talk about with Ebola. You can get all this. I'll go through it quickly. But basically, pollution up towards 10 million people for this, but it literally is now 100 million children in particular, again, have been identified as having health impacts. Maybe you can't work, they can't do well at school. What else, Annie? Just
developmental delays. They could even be delayed so much that they're retarded. We have problems with the pregnant mothers having too high lead levels, so then their unborn children also. I mean, it's really very problematic.
And as you can see, most of this is occurring in the economically depressed part of the world, in Africa and Southern Asia and parts of South America. This did, I can't remember, if the movie about Accra in Ghana, the recycling center, I don't know if that was shown through Sustainable or a different source, but it was.
It was, yeah, the burning.
Yeah. So Pure Earth worked there, and it was a simple solution to all the burning that they were doing, and to get the copper out of a wire. And there's a simple solution of stripping the plastic off so they don't have to burn it. Anyway, this was just how pollution's not a very hot topic for people to want to say, oh, I'd like to help that out. And AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis get a lot more funding. But that's not what we're here. But there's the wire that gets taken care of without having to burn it. Sources of lead contamination. Leaded gasoline, believe it or not. The last country to stop was last year, and I think it was Myanmar. Stopped leaded gas, but leaded fuel is still used in boats, airplanes, lead smelters. The amount of lead that is used in the world is gone up and up. Amazing after all these thousands of years. Used lead acid batteries is literally an epidemic in those parts of the world where car batteries are taken apart in a backyard. The lead is heated, and because it's worth some money. A lead battery in a tropical environment typically will last about a year, and a lot of those countries have nowhere to properly recycle them. There obviously are old contamination sites, lead paint, ceramic glazes, which we'll talk about in Mexico in particular, and some other sources of lead. It leads to decreased IQ, health problems, birth weight, kidney damage, and as we'll discuss, death. Lead toxicity, I really want to just point out this 10 micrograms per deciliter. That used to be in the US what the standard was. If a child was above 10, like for school testing, they would have to go see a medical professional. It's now down to 5, and it really needs to be 0. There's really 0 level of lead that is acceptable, particularly in children. Lead contamination is the placenta, so the fetus is impacted in utero.
But you can
Children
see as you go
are not
along
so,
this
that's why it
line.
affects
Yeah. Go ahead, Don.
them so much.
You're breaking up for us, Don. You might want to turn your camera off for a bit.
Well, you're having a little bit of audio trouble, Don.
Yeah, and he's frozen. I would turn your video off, Don.
As the lead level. And as our internet connection's unstable, right? Ooh.
No, I don't know what to say.
There you go.
There you
You
go.
came
Is that
back.
better?
I turned your video off.
Okay. So what we've learned having the grandchildren living with us is that children under the age of 5 typically put their hands in their mouth 30 times an hour, 36 times an hour. So if they're living in an environment where leaded soil is present or lead paint, it gets into their system very quickly. I'm not saying anything about Cheerios. They're fine. So what do you do with lead contamination? You put it in a landfill, encapsulate it, put it under a roadway. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere. It does not migrate. It can solidify it, but it can't be destroyed. So in Senegal, it's Charoy-sur-Mer, and it was a fishing village that's now really part of the greater urban area of Dakar. And as you'll see, it was settled during a drought, and they had a guy was having folks do lead acid battery, break the batteries down, and to make fishing weights to get the lead. And they had a pile of sludge that literally, when you break a battery apart, there's sludge at the bottom that they would just take out, dig out with their hand and put it in a pile. And there's really large pile, probably 10 meters high and 30 meters long, was there. The price of lead went up worldwide, and somebody came and said, there's a lot of money to be made here, and started paying people to sift the soil, bag it, so they could get the lead out. We would do a lot of testing after 15 or 20 children died. And their blood lead levels were, if you remember that graphic, 5, maybe 10 micrograms per deciliter. These kids were up to 600 micrograms per deciliter. 30% lead in the soil. It's all dirt. Everybody just walks around picking it up. Interior dust on the windowsills, 2% lead. So it was decided to excavate it would be the best way. Initially, the government wanted to move everybody out. We had meeting after meeting, which is the community has to decide that they want to deal with this and what to do about it. Their number one concern was they did not want to be relocated. So we did lots of detailed assessments, came up with a strategy to clean it up, got approvals most of the time. Sometimes you have to do work to get through government red tape and ask for forgiveness after the fact. And there's been follow-up blood lead testing after the cleanup was done. And that's been very, very good.
There was blood, we'll go back to that for a second. we did blood testing, lead testing in the blood for the children and for community residents in order to sort of see what their levels were like, so that we had a pre-cleanup level, base level, and then we did several times thereafter in order to see what happened after the cleanup. And what you do see is that the levels started, and you'll see further in the program, but the levels really decreased significantly. Unfortunately for some people, lead will often settle in their bones, the bone structure, and sort of come back out. So for some of the older people, this was particularly true. We found this in Mexico as well, that they tended to stay high, whereas the children over time, their lead levels dropped significantly. Anyway, continue on, Don.
So community is located on the Atlantic Ocean. That little cleared area is where the smelter used to be. Again, when they settled this area, there was nothing but a little fishing village. Little close-ups, little time frame of events, so informal lead battery recycling in the area for 12 years. And then it started to spread. The soil got transported by people walking through it. They started sifting it. Again, they would get paid about $100 US, which was a huge amount of money, to take soil back to their homes and sift it there and bag it. And of course, the children are with them. And it moved throughout. It literally was, and you'll get a link for the movie that was made. It's a lead rush. It's as similar as a gold rush, but it was a lead rush. People were bagging it, burying it in their yards, putting it under their beds, anywhere they could do to save it, like an insurance policy that I've got this, it's worth money of this bag of soil. And literally it was going all over the community. And lead is not something like, if gasoline spills, you can smell it. You can't tell it's there. Traders came from India and started buying it up and getting the sifting done. And then 31 children died within a month. And they had no idea what it was from. They thought it was malaria at first, but it wasn't. And the blood lead samples went back to France, because it was an old French colony. They had the capacity, and the lead levels were just never seen anywhere else in the world. It was amazing. So the government initially moved some of the soil and did the testing. Again, these children, 42 of them were at 45 micrograms per deciliter. They could not test the dead children because of religious tradition. So they tested the siblings of the children that died. This is a view of the community. Yeah, like I said, it got developed initially as a fishing village during a drought. Well, the drought ended, and this community is underwater 3 months of the year, 1 to 3 feet of water. There was a railroad tracks you see there. There was a fertilizer factory up the road, and probably 5 times a day, a train load of tanker trains of sulfuric acid went through right the middle of their community and their market. Then the lead just got thrown. They didn't know what to do with it. Nobody would deal with it anymore. So it was just all over we'd find bags buried in people's yards, in old abandoned buildings, old workshops. This is the community. It floods, the railroad tracks there. There's no infrastructure as far as trash pickup or anything like that.
Or sewer.
No sewer. The goats are happy, but
yeah,
very sad. And this is a market. It's a pretty well-known market in the area, Charrue-sur-Mer, the Marché. These are the areas that we had to dig up. Again, you can see it's all just sandy soil. And then we had to figure out how to time the cleanup So it starts raining around July 1st. And then you can't do anything for months. So we had to time it and get all the approvals from the government to do the work beforehand. It got delayed and delayed because we didn't have a place to take the dirt initially. And then it rained. And I was just like, I remember, and it was like, it flooded right away, but it stopped raining and dried out, thank goodness. We were also fortunate that 2 of our children got to come over and do testing. They're hydrogeologists like their father, and they got to come do testing.
There's Don Jones.
So it's a little machine that measures all the heavy metals in the soil. So we could do literally hundreds and hundreds of readings, shallow and at depth, and identify the areas, the hot spots that needed to get taken care of. Inside, had to have crews clean because, again, the dust was up to 2% lead. Not an easy task. You have to wash it down several times and try to vacuum it out. You can look at all those surfaces that had to be cleaned. Little storage yards. I found this was under the street, bags of lead that got buried by this house. We then dug it up, put it in a big pile and hauled it away. And it went to a huge landfill that is visible from space, buried 20-some feet underneath trash. So it's never going to be accessible to humans again. And again, it doesn't leach, it doesn't move. It's the safest place to be. I wanted it to go under a highway. They built a brand new highway, but it didn't go that well. You can see these little areas. The lead is in the soil, but it's covered with trash. You have to get it cleaned up. We used all local labor. Everybody was happy to be working, even myself. That is the father behind me who 5 of his 10 children died. Clean it up.
The day the day we had them clean up, you can see they're wearing their hazmat outfits. They were so excited to be able to put these outfits on. Of course, I think as the day wore on, I think maybe the booties wound up on their heads, what have you, and it became more of a joke. But
all the little kids would take the gloves, make balloons, and
yeah.
It's just, the idea is to get rid of the toxic stuff as fast as possible to get rid of the exposure. And then we brought in clean fill to cover it up. And in this one yard, then it got nice grass, and it's a happy ending for that part of it. And they went back, there's going to be a link to a movie, again, this about 11-minute movie that got made about this. They went back a year or so ago and did testing of all the kids, and the blood lead levels were way down. I mean, below 10, I think. It was great. Very happy it took 8 different trips to get over there to get through all the approvals and get it done. Switching a little bit to Mexico, there's about 50 to 60,000 artisanal ceramicists who still use lead glaze. It's called Greta. And they use it because culturally it was thought to give shine to the pottery that was better than other sources of glaze. And also I remember taking a cooking class for Mole in Oaxaca, and she was like, in the pot, the ceramic pot, you got to really scrape it hard. And the lead comes out of the scraping. I didn't know it at the time. And it adds a bit of sweetness to the food. So the idea is we needed to find out how extensive this was, and worked with the government, a ceramicist who came up with a lead-free glaze that we'd go into communities, clean them up, assess it, and if they switch to that glaze, the government would put in a communal gas-fired kiln, and they could stop using their wood-fired kilns, they give kind of an uneven product because they can't control the temperature as well. And the whole idea is not only getting rid of the lead, but also giving the the artisans a better market to sell their product. So we went to lots of small towns all over Mexico, all the way from Jalisco all the way to Veracruz, and testing and blood lead testing, and finding out what it was about. And at the cleanups, it's not rocket science. It's pretty easy. This is a typical wood-fired kiln. And this will be in their home, next to their kitchen, sleeping area. And so the dirt floors, the lead could be pretty high. This is actually a lead-free glaze, so it look just as good as leaded glaze. That's the Greta, which is the leaded glaze that they use when they're firing. Tight spots, lots of surface areas. But again, a power vac, clean it up, wash it down. In this spot, this is right next to their kitchen and sleeping area, and cleaned it up and then put down a cement concrete pad over it all to eliminate the exposure to the kids. Blood lead testing of the children in particular. And there's a nice gas kiln that this community got. This was way up in the mountains, and I show this because we're working with, well, I can't point them out, but there's Annie on the left, and next to her is the government, the ceramicist who came up with the lead-free glaze, who started this whole project. And further to the right is Jack Carabatos, who is a lead expert in New York, teaches at Hunter College.
But you can see in that picture, the two women that are foreground, both of the two were pregnant. And we found when we were up there and when we were testing, that they were testing so high that we recommended that they had to go into a hospital for removal, chelation therapy, in order to try to remove some of the lead from their bodies, because their unborn children were being impacted.
It's just very sad. Look at the woman in blue. She has you can't really tell, but that right down around her belly, it's a safety pin. And culturally, a pregnant woman will put the safety pin over her fetus as a protection. And it was so sad because we knew that the lead is going to the embryo.
Yeah.
This is something I have. There were two brothers we worked with who used lead glaze, and one of the side effects of lead is they shake a lot. And so all they could make was pottery, very simple, plain, that they sold at Walmart and Costco. And once they stopped using lead and stopped shaking, they turned into real artisans. And this piece of work, they could make such a better living making art versus just everyday pottery. So that's one of the good outcomes of it. And it is a beautiful piece. Anyway, you'll get these links to a 9-minute movie about Senegal and some of the other videos at pureearth.org. It's all available. There's tons of resources there about it. And we were fortunate to be able to do it.
Absolutely.
We had a guy, a paint contractor, when we lived in Annapolis in an old, historic house. And we wanted him to do some work, and his shaking was so bad from all the lead paint removal he had done through his life that he couldn't paint because of his shaky hands. So that was sort of a first realization. And that's it for that.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thanks so much, Dawn. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you to start your video, and you can see if you start it, if it will be glitchy still or if it'll work. And otherwise, we'll just look at Annie, I guess.
I have to go find it.
You have to go find it. Okay.
Yeah, we can see you now. It looks okay. Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Oh,
All right, let's see.
oh, you're gonna do your video? Yeah, see if we can get it. And in the meantime, I'll tell people to put your questions in the chat for Dawn and Annie.
You can't see it.
No, because you're sharing the PowerPoint screen. You need it. You could try share. You could stop sharing and share your whole screen, and we can probably see it. Or stop sharing and share the YouTube. But if not, it's okay.
Yeah, I'll lose you.
That's fine. I'll send it out to everyone who's registered, so that'd be better anyway because they can.
Suggest everyone take a look if you're interested. They do have, and we'll tell you when you get the link from what point in the video, if you're really only wanting to take a look sort of at the Senegal piece and what we did, they have I don't know, it's a couple minute presentation specifically on that. And it really sort of brings home some of the ideas of how devastating that contamination was to the community with the numbers of children that died and what had happened. It brings home the idea that the community really can work together in union with Pure Earth, which is who we represented, in trying to clean up the situation. And that it shows very clearly that once it was cleaned up, that in just a matter of time, the blood lead levels really decreased in the children, and, you know, sort of a very nice, happy ending, if you will. So, what's Kathy saying?
One of the reasons we moved to Woodstock is Kathy and Rick Fisk, we've known for 45 years, and they convinced us to move up here.
That's right.
Well, Kathy has a totally new appreciation for your work. Kudos. That's sweet.
Oh, that's sweet.
There's a question that was sent directly to me, so you can't see it, but I'll ask it of you. This person's curious, why was respiratory protection worn in Mexico, but not in Senegal, at least from the photos?
No, it was utilized in both places. You are right. Some of the pictures that you see in Senegal, Don was out, you saw him using the XRF out in the field, that kind of thing. But when he's doing, for example, the XRF, the contamination, his ability to really get inhale that is minimal.
Yeah, partly I was outside.
Yeah.
But the inside, when we're in a workshop, and the dust really moves around a lot when we're trying to clean it up. So that made sense. But outside, we weren't creating really any dust.
So if you picked up that impression, that really wasn't the case. Protective hazmat suits were used. Certainly when we were working, we were moving soil around, these bags that had to sort of get dug up in a variety of places and so forth. Particularly when we had it, it would come to a central area, and we would have huge piles of this, and then we would then have to move it out of the town in big dump trucks. And always there was protective gear used at those times.
I think that the question, that the follow-up was, those guys are working outside, not in a confining kind of space with dust, and they were probably given masks, but the kids just would come and take anything they could find as it was a novelty. You just got to work with what you can work with, and get it out of there as fast as you can. It's an incomplete answer, but
in these countries, unlike the United States, where there are standards for everything one has to do and clean up and levels and so forth, these countries have no standards whatsoever. So, to come in and to assess and identify the extent of a problem and sort of map out how you're going to systematically remove the soil and get it out of there. We use the best practices that we have from the United States. But sometimes some of those practices were not practical in some of these countries. So you come in with that knowledge and you really try your best to use appropriate safety protocols, etc. But sometimes in some of the countries it doesn't work, and you've got a job to do, and the dangers, and you really work as best as you can given your circumstances. It was very green grass too. The goats loved it, let me tell you.
Yeah, the quality of the green grass in the rescued spot.
So a goat is basically it's an insurance policy.
Yeah.
For these families as not only a source for milk and eventually meat, but if really gets bad, hard times, they can sell the goat. And it makes a big difference.
Michael, I know you've hopped on as well. I'll ask the next question and then you do another. But Brenda asked, what projects are you working on now?
That's a good question. At current moment, we don't have a project. I'm always hopeful that we will get assigned a new one. There's been some discussion that we may go and help. One of the things that Pure Earth does is an assessment, I think we mentioned it briefly, all over the world of some of the worst lead and mercury contamination locations. And they're doing a huge database really to sort of pinpoint and take a look at this. By collecting that data, then they can start to formulate a plan as to how they're going to attack this, how they're going to generate and work on trying to get money from, Green Earth, not Red Cross, Green Cross, and some other places.
World Bank, there's lots of funding sources.
This kind of thing, but come up with projects. Anyway, there was some discussion that we might help with some of the identification in some of these countries. But as of the moment, we do not have a current project.
I think there wasn't anything going on during COVID. And they've also beefed up a lot of their country representatives, and they're well trained. And that's the idea. Local people take it over and do it themselves.
Right.
And the focus on lead and mercury, that's taken, they're spending a couple years logistically transforming from what they were before and setting that up.
Oh, I had a couple questions that I posed happen to be in line here. So they're interrelated. What inspired you to undertake such challenging projects? And was there some other project that you had learned about that really made you aware that you could accomplish what you were, or you hope to accomplish what you were in this kinds of situations and circumstances you were working with?
I just always felt that call to do something different. Having the business is one thing. Do a lot of cleanup of gas station, petroleum, dry cleaner kind of stuff. But always, me personally, it was trying to get somewhere else and have an impact. And we could do pro bono work. That was fine. And I think what happened is the founder of Pure Earth, Richard Fuller, had some notice, it probably was before email even, I don't know, to a groundwater group, National Groundwater Association, asking if anybody was interested in help. So I responded, said sure, and I went to New York and met him. And this project came along, and it was very, at the beginning, not knowing what the extent of the contamination was in Senegal. And so somebody thought, well, it's X amount of dirt. And I thought, well, that's just like 10 truckloads or something. That's easy. Well, fine, you go do it. So, and that's how it really, and I'd never, it was a awesome experience. It's also scary in a, making that
Give them,
jump.
give them
Yeah.
the story, the very first time you.
Yeah, I
leave.
landed, a guy who was supposed to be with me, who was a real expert in this, had done a ton of work all over the world. And his plane got delayed. So I landed the car 3 a.m. There's not a lot of street lights. I'm surrounded by 100 of my new best friends who want to take care of me. I decide I need a little money. So I go into this little, the airport was not anything great. I go to the ATM, I put my card in and it keeps it. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever. And then I get dragged to a taxi and thrown in. And I thought, well, if this is it, it's it, whatever. And next morning, I wake up and I go back to the airport on a Sunday and knock on the door by the machine. And this woman answers, and there literally is a box full of ATM cards. And I said, I lost you. She reaches down and, is this it? Yep. God, see you later. And then I found the ATM that always worked. And I only went to that one.
Yeah.
But one trip turned into many. And I was thankful my daughter, our daughter who had spent time in South America, just on her own, went to Honduras and to Mexico. And I was like in my room, looking out in the city, and it was a pretty poor city.
Very
She
cool.
said, Dad, just get outside. Go get out there. Dope. So you just do. And everybody was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
And
Absolutely wonderful.
in the community, I mean, we would stay at lunchtime. They would take a break from working, about 12 o'clock or so. And everybody would go back to their homes and they would have their family meal. And, then they would reconvene a little bit later in the afternoon to start back up again. And we always were invited to a particular family. And it was the family actually that lost the, I don't know, 5 kids, 3,
Five.
they
Five.
lost.
Father who
I'm stopping Dawn's video again. You're both glitching.
Very interesting family. Oh yeah, it says internet is connection is unstable. Sorry about that, guys. That's Bridgewater internet, I guess, that kind of thing. But it was very fascinating. It was very fascinating to sit with her and later at least one day. And so she did some recount talking to us about what the situation was like with her children and so forth. And, it was very sad, but she was also very happy to see that something was being done to clean this up.
Thank you. I turned off your video and Dawn's disappeared, but you're still here. So he'll probably come back.
Well, he's down there. He's leaning against the tree. That's Kilimanjaro. Don one year decided he wanted to climb Kilimanjaro. So that's his picture.
Oh, there he is. I do see it now. Here, I'll let him unmute himself. Thank you. Sorry, Michael, was there more of that question?
No, that's good. Thank you.
I put a question here that I was wondering related to the film we showed about, American waste making it to other countries. And I was curious where the lead acid batteries came from that caused all the lead contamination. And if that was like a case of other countries polluting, or how often you see like our waste making it to other countries.
So in the US, am I coming through all right?
Yeah, you're
In
fine.
the US, batteries, we pay a fee when you get a battery for your vehicle, and that goes back to there are recycling centers. It's cradle to grave in the Western world. It's not so in the other parts of the world. These batteries are coming from all the cars, buses, anything with lead batteries. So now we're transitioning, presumably, into lithium batteries. and that's better from environmental standpoint. Lithium is, I'm not aware that it's really toxic. The bad part of lithium is that it still uses child labor to mine the metal as they do with lead. But it's an epidemic, and batteries just don't last more than about a year in these tropical environments. And you can understand how many more vehicles there are than there were 20 years ago in China and in India and in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. And
Don, I also do think though early on, a certain amount of the batteries that they were over taking apart and smelting the lead down earlier on. I do think there are certainly some US batteries that made their way over there. I think we as a group of people need to, when we think we're sometimes recycling properly, today it is probably better, but when we were thinking we were recycling in the past, some of the times that wound up not necessarily being recycled, shipped out of the United States elsewhere. And
first, when the question about why do this, when I've heard about these guys that first time, one of the projects they were working on way back early on was in China, and it turned out, I mean, like 90% of our recycle electronics was going to this one village in China. And it was absolutely devastating. And you have to be careful. There was a company in Colorado, yes, we recycle your electronics. And all that stuff was found on a container ship heading to Africa. So I know when we recycled, this is 20 years ago, we found out who they were, asked all the right questions. What do you do with this stuff? Because it's full of heavy metals.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious about that.
I don't know much. Like I said, the mercury side is different, but their whole focus on the mercury side is gold again, and they're with a lot of jewelers finding out where does your gold come from, and really finding out what the source of that is from a child labor standpoint and from not using mercury. And it's the same with lead acid batteries. There is a lot of funding, and all of the battery manufacturers have now created a consortium to go and address this and build recycling centers throughout the world. So that's good news.
I think one of the things that they're trying to do, I had heard over in some of the countries, is sort of this idea of an exchange. If you want to buy a battery, you have to give them a battery. And the idea being that then they had control on where did that battery go to, instead of it just going,
It's going to evolve into the same as hazardous waste in the US. It'll evolve into a cradle to grave system that can track where they're going. But, in Senegal, there were about 10 or so women doing this, and they're getting paid very well at the time. And so when we got the cleanup going and they're not doing it anymore, that was a good job. Is there any alternative to that? Yeah. And there were discussions back and forth about that. Our expertise is identifying and cleaning it up. Our expertise is not in coming up with an alternative economy or support system. Our job is to remove the risk that was killing children. And I think that's not an unreasonable. That's what our expertise is. It's not in how to set something else up.
Yeah, but the community itself, I think, started to raise that issue. If you take this away from us, what are we going to do? This particular fishing village really no longer did a whole lot of fishing. The waters were too polluted, etc. So they needed some sort of income you saw in some of the pictures really how poor they are. So we're not talking a real high level of income. We're just talking, bare necessities in order to, have food to give to the children, or what have you. So some of the people in the community were raising that question as to, okay, we take this away, what can they do in return? And as Don said, that wasn't our expertise, but the community was looking, what could they do internally within themselves to sort of solve some of this particular problem.
Goes back, and it's been demonstrated over and over and over that we were there to do what the community wanted to get done. They had to want to do that. I keep my personal side is there's 20,000 aid organizations in Haiti, and it's still the poorest country in this hemisphere. Something is very wrong with whatever's being done. And the job that Purette did in Haiti was, again, it was a lead thing. Got the soil cleaned up, turned it into a park, soccer field, playground. The one in the Dominican Republic, actually, they got Poppy went down to say yay when that project was done, David Ortiz. So that's a good thing. It's good stuff. Anyway.
Another question I had, are there organizations that are doing this kind of effective environmental cleanup in similar communities that you would recommend people look into possibly supporting?
I would recommend you support ours, Pure Earth.
I don't think there may be other small, that bothered me when we were there. You could be, because Dakar, there's a lot of people there, population wise, and there's a lot of NGO kind of work going on. And I always thought, could there somehow be a clearinghouse to coordinate that work? Because there's private companies, private environmental companies that are getting paid to do work in Senegal for cleaning up contaminated sites. It's just this one came through World Health Organization, said we need help. We don't know what to do, and there's not the resources. The town of Charoy-sur-Mer is one of 5 communities, population of about 35,000 people, and their annual government budget is 200,000 US.
Wow.
So not a lot of services.
Yeah. Particularly those services that would impact health. Sewer, for example. No sewer, no water.
Yeah, there was a picture, and I didn't notice if it showed up, but I noticed when we were walking through the village in the first time, the community, that the window sills were down near the street level. And it was because of the flooding. The government kept bringing in sand and filling it up. So the windows were the bottom of the windows was almost at street level, because it used to be probably 8 feet, 6 feet lower.
Wow.
But anyway, when I started as a geologist in this business, everybody I knew went to work in the oil patch. And I went to the pollution path. People thought we were crazy.
Yeah.
Well, it's really fascinating to hear about. It's not something I think a lot of us see on like a daily basis. So
no, it's really sad. Really, it's devastating if a child grows up developmentally disabled because of lead contamination or mercury. Again, they can't do well in school. They're not going to get a good job. Other people can't work. It has tremendous ripple effect through an economy.
It certainly keeps them in poverty. When you think about that, how do you get ahead? You educate yourself and you try to make something, sort of better of yourself, what have you. And, that's not happening when you have communities that are as polluted as this particular community was. But, I suppose the good news is, at least for us, the good news is that, there is something that can be done about it if people care enough, or if people get involved, or what have you. The way we got involved was obviously, we felt compelled to go out and provide some expertise to a community who then took on the project with us, and worked side by side with us. You can see, and something happened, and the end result, clearly 5 years later, and we went back, we tested, and we took our XRF back, and we examined some of the streets and the small alleyways and inside homes, etc., to sort of see what the lead levels were. And many of those lead levels had dropped significantly. Obviously, we had moved a lot of the lead out, but it's in the soil. You can't get all the soil out, so you do the very best you can. But it did show up in the lead testing, in the children and the moms and dads, etc., that had decreased significantly, back down to what would be considered, at least by US standards, acceptable.
Earth intervention through WHO and the community worked to the community's advantage. Obviously, it would have been much easier for the Senegalese government to come in with bulldozers, just flatten the whole village and say it's done, nobody go there anymore. But this was their home, and they did not want to be kicked out of their home. Protection again.
Can I read the question? So it's in the,
I'm sorry.
In the video record. Did you ever at any time think you needed protection for yourselves from these toxins or anything else? If so, what did you use?
Because in lead in particular, you don't know if it's, certainly initially, if it's there or not. I would say that the clothing we took and shoes, everything was discarded before we left the country. Didn't want to bring any lead back. And it would have been minuscule. Again, the exposure route versus stepping in, a pool of gasoline is very different exposure. Lead ingested, and we weren't doing that.
Yeah, I also seem to recall, I don't know, Don, if you remember, but I think at one point we did ourselves what our blood lead levels were to
Before.
see if before and then after, to see if we ourselves had picked up levels. But our length of time of the contamination, duration, and the intensity of it was nothing like what the villagers would have gotten. So, yes, we could have. We did protect ourselves as well. We did do lead testing on ourselves. We were pretty comfortable with, certainly what we were doing. Again, you can't see it. You can't smell it. You don't, but it's there. So, we would do and take protection as we, Ken, I think if you were to flip back on some of the photos that you saw of Don, you saw very little of me, but, we were always wearing gloves. We were always, this kind of thing. So,
lead is just insidious. So I grew up in LA. So growing up, I was equivalent to smoking 2 packs a day because of the smog. But what's more fascinating is today, you go to LA, Detroit, Chicago, any industrial city, the lead is still in the soil from when we used leaded gas. It cannot be destroyed. And part of the lead in Flint was in the summertime, the blood lead levels go up in children in these cities because they're outside after a winter of being inside, and they're playing in the dirt again, and the dirt has lead in it. We think we'd have learned from, was it Captain Cook? I think that they all had mental issues after eating salt water got into the lead solder and the tins of the food they ate and created problems, lead poisoning.
Yeah, it's a good point that we're not immune from lead here either.
No,
Um,
no. Old
And-
pipes.
Yeah, it's lots of old pipes and other things. We're just past 6:30, so I want to not have us run over, and thank you for your time, for spending an hour with us and kind of going through the work you've done. We really appreciate it, and thank you to everyone who came. I'll send out that recording, and make sure you both get it, and I'll send the video as well, and any other information that you want me to send along, I'm happy to.
Well, maybe can I give a little plug? Maybe you can give the information to Pure Earth. Go to the website, explore it, whatever. If you feel so inclined, they're absolutely a wonderful nonprofit that is doing some really good things in the world.
Well, thank you, Don and Annie. It was just incredibly impactful work and really inspiring.
Thank you for having us.
Certain places too.
I think I had my I don't know what year anniversary, but they persuaded me to go over to Senegal, taking an XRF over in order to meet up with my husband. And don't worry, you can have your 40th or whatever anniversary it was, which we had in Dakar, doing this work.
It's great.
Anyway,
All
Well,
right.
always like the chance to spread the news.
indeed.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.